Welcome to a special encore episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this special bonus episode of the pod, we're revisiting our interview with Kevin Tulip, President of Primark US. We thought it deserved a second or perhaps even your first listen. Steve, we now have almost 250 episodes of our little award-winning COVID project. Many interviews with top retail CEOs and presidents. What drew your attention to this particular interview?
Well, I imagine many of our listeners are familiar with the Primark story, the Primark brand, because it is quite a large brand already. Started in Dublin, has expanded to something like 450 stores in 17 countries, mostly in Europe. But because we have a large audience in North America, Australia, and other places that may not be so familiar with Primark, we wanted to talk about the Primark brand more broadly, some of the things they're doing, pushing on sustainability, upping their digital capabilities, getting into click and collect and some of those things. But I think one of the things that's characteristic of many of the guests we have on is we love to tell the stories of remarkable brands and how they're driving remarkable growth. And at the time we had Kevin on, Primark was just starting really a big push into the US. So I just thought I'd mention really quickly before we get into the interview what's transpired in the, 19, 20 months or so since we talked to Kevin. There's been quite a lot of activity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they opened their second distribution center in the U.S. down in Jacksonville, Florida, to support the growth of their stores in the southern part of the U.S. They just ended 2024 with 29 stores in 12 states, including the first two in Texas. And they are aiming for 60 by the end of 2026, including a recently announced Herald Square store. So Herald Square, as many people might know, is in New York City. It happens to be the home of the largest Macy's store. So there's a bit of irony, I guess, in terms of the evolution of retail that will happen there just a few blocks away. They have not announced the opening date of that yet, but they are working on that. And I actually expect, even though they've said 60 stores by the end of 2026, it wouldn't surprise me if they pick up the pace, both because they seem to be having quite a lot of success, but also I think there could be a lot of opportunities for them to get space, including some perhaps mall-based space as anchors leave and repurposing projects go on. So Primark's not a company that has opened stores at a blistering pace, so maybe culturally that won't happen, but I certainly think they have some interesting opportunities. Also, Uniqlo, which is not the same concept, but a similar concept out of Japan, they are also making a big push in North America. So might be a little bit of an arms race there to watch. So anyway, great interview, great guy. Primark, one of the hottest brands to watch globally.
Reminder to everyone, we'll be back on the mic for season 10, January 14th, while we're at NRF, and looking forward, of course, to seeing everyone there, and an exciting year that will hold, no doubt, more than a few surprises. Now, without further ado, and there's been much ado, let's get to our interview with Kevin from Primark.
Well, Michael and I are delighted to welcome Kevin Tulip to the podcast. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for me having me on, Steve. How are you?
We're doing well. And where are you joining us from?
Yes, I'm up here in Boston, where we have our Primark US home office.
Excellent. Well, I am sure that we'll get into a lot of details, but usually what we like to do just before we kind of dive into the questions about the business and your particular perspectives is just have the guests tell us a little bit about who they are, maybe a bit about your personal and professional journey, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, of course. So I actually joined Primark 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago now. So I started working at Primark in Newcastle, in the northeast of England, where I grew up. And I started as a holiday temp colleague working on the cash register on the ladies' floor, and actually just fell in love with retail across those first few months of being in there, and really saw that actually there was a fantastic career to be had here with the supervisors and the managers that I had around me. And at that point, the business was going through some huge growth, so I also had the ability to move around a lot. So it was great to start back then with what was back then a small Irish business, and of course today is becoming a global business.
I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with Primark, but particularly as you're newer to the U.S. and North America, can you give us a little sense about the brand, what it's all about, value proposition, scale, scope, those sorts of things?
Yeah, of course. So we actually started in 1969, and we were founded by Arthur Ryan, who set up our first store under the name Pennies in Dublin on Mary Street. That was the first store that we opened. And the premise was always around bringing affordable fashion to the people of Dublin, something that still we base ourselves on today. We've grown over the years, over the more than 50 years, to now 15 countries, 72,000 employees globally. But we're still very much built on those foundations. So everyday affordability for everyone in all markets where we trade.
So now you are leading Primark's expansion into the U.S. And tell us a little bit about what that looks like, how it's going, some of the lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved over to the US in 2021. Previous to that, I'd been leading the two of the markets in Northern Europe. So I was in the Netherlands and Belgium. And it was great for me to be able to move over to the US at a time where we had made a solid decision and therefore a public announcement on our growth. So we'd announced to get to 60 stores by 2026. We were trading at that time on 13 stores. We just opened a collection of stores through COVID. And it was great to join the business at that point where we were making that announcement and that growth plan. So it's been great over just over 12 months there, really building a team here, building out the team in Boston to really get ready for that growth, to open some stores. So great to say that we opened 3 stores during the holiday season there in New York, in Jamaica Avenue, Queens, City Point, Brooklyn, and Roosevelt Field on Long Island. And really getting ready now we've got 7 more store openings coming up between April and September. So a lot of focus has been getting ourselves ready for that growth, and then also making sure that we're in a great position to continue that growth through to 2026.
Now, I know that there are a number of brands that have come from the UK and tried to be successful in the US, and it hasn't necessarily gone so well. Do you take any lessons from Sainsbury, Tesco, Marks and Spencer's experience here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are an Irish business, so we always have a bit of a chuckle at that one. There are a number of UK businesses that have come over, but as an Irish business, we definitely feel very clear on some of the lessons that have been learned. And I think, our growth has been slow. We first opened our first store in 2015, downtown Boston. We spent a lot of time, previous to even me being here, really understanding around our model and our concept and what works, and really trialing differences between store size and product range, product offer from our global range. And we really still continue to do that through to today. It's taken us from 2015 up until today to get to 16 stores. And of course, now we feel a great sense of confidence on pushing towards that 60 store estate by 2026. But I think a lot of that has been around those lessons. We right-sized a couple of stores. We looked at our product offer and saw where the US consumer was really getting excited about some of that product, and we've leaned into that. License has been a fantastic product offering for us. So we've really made sure that, we have the right licenses and the right product range. And, customers have responded to it. I was really proud that when we opened that store in City Point, downtown Brooklyn, on a very, very cold day on December 20th, we had just over 1,000 people queued up before we opened the doors. And that really tells me that the brand travels and that people are aware of our brand even before we open the store.
It's really interesting listening to your global expansion strategy. I might call it the kind of a carpenter's measure twice and cut once approach versus the kind of barnstorming into a country, open a bunch of stores on the same day. And, they both create momentum differently for the business. I wanted to peel back. You just articulated some changes or thoughts around adapting merchandising strategy and maybe format. But as you go and inevitably go back to the head office and you're sitting around the table with your fellow country leaders, how do you explain, or what differences in the strategy do you talk about that are a reaction to the different competitive set or the real estate dynamics in the U.S. and any challenges that you ran into that was kind of scene? You know, when you're talking to your fellow counterparts and you and the team are putting out the strategy, how do you explain America back home and what it takes that may be a bit different to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a few different topics that I sort of talk about when I'm talking to that peer group. I think store size is one of the major ones. I think on the continent of Europe, we would be opening stores, 60,000 square feet in city centres on traditional high streets in Europe. That's where we've been very successful and where most of our competitor set does business. Obviously for the US, although we do have a couple of stores in downtown locations, so Boston, Chicago, and Philadelphia, we do most of our business in malls. And that's where obviously the store size and layout and even department adjacencies are quite different from what we would normally do in a multi-floor store in a city centre and a high street in Europe. When it comes to product mix, so certainly for us, we're very focused on apparel. We really want to continue to build our brand here, and we're doing that, on some great, category mixes on ladies, men's, but also on children's wear, which has been a really great category for us over the last number of years and has actually been growing. And I think in Europe, of course, people are a lot more used to our brand. They've known us, and in a lot of European countries, even like me, you grow up with Primark. It's a retailer where your mom would have taken you into as a kid, so you're well aware of it. Whereas for us, we're really introducing that brand to, in some cases, a new market. So we definitely focus a lot more on the apparel. In Europe, they've got probably a bigger mix of let's say, lifestyle and homeware. And we still have that product, but a much smaller category for us. And then I think license is the other area. So we work globally with a number of licenses like Netflix, and we have a number of big sports licenses like NFL, NBA. But for us, we do a lot more in stores in terms of bringing that product together. And certainly we'd have it much further forward as a priority than maybe some of our European stores.
I mean, you're an international business executive. When you came to Boston, was there something that surprised you in terms of a challenge that you didn't think would be there? Now, of course, you came during the COVID era, so let's set that aside because none of us expected that. So let's put that one aside. But when you're sitting in your office and gearing up the business, you're like, wow, I didn't expect that to be the challenge that it turned out to be. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I'd say probably the frequency in which our customers come into store. I think that there is definitely a difference between US and Europe. And I think in Europe, it's, for most part, a lot more people live in the city centres. So people would be dropping into stores probably more frequently, but actually spending less while they're in. Whereas I think in the US, and largely it's where we do business, obviously in malls, people are making that journey to the mall. So they might go less frequently, but actually spend longer in the store and spend more while they're in there. And I think when you then follow that through, you really need to focus even more around that in-store experience and really thinking about how do you take any pain points of being a physical only retailer and remove them, whether it's something simple like removing an item limit on the fitting room or trying to, remove a queue from a cash desk. How can we continue to do that? And although we're very, very, I'd say, obsessed on price and value, the in-store experience for us is also a massive priority where we spend a lot of time.
Interesting. It sounds like there's more similarities than differences. I just wanted to follow one quick thread on that. What about things like returns? Do you find is it higher than you would have expected? Is it about normal? And I guess I'm getting at your experience of the customers in America versus other places that you've operated. Do you find any material difference or, minor difference?
There's actually probably more similarities than differences, if I'm honest with you, which I think has also led to the success of Primark in the US so far. I think some of the learnings for me being here was, most of the European markets, and certainly where I've been based, are fairly small. So although you have some cultural differences between the big cities, they're fairly small countries. I think for me, when I took over Primark US, of course, I'm based here in Boston, but we also have a store down in Sawgrass Mills in Florida, and we have a downtown store in Chicago, Illinois. So really, really starting to understand the geography and the climate differences. It's probably been something that I've been also just getting used to and getting to grips with. I think there's a lot of benefits in it for us, but it's something that's quite different from most of the European countries where we trade.
Now let's talk about e-commerce. So famously, controversially, maybe, I don't know, but you're not a leader in e-commerce. You've been a bit, how shall I say, slow to embrace. What's your thought around e-commerce, and how is that thinking evolving as you move forward?
Yeah, look, I've always been really proud to be with a business that has made a very conscious choice, and that we've thrown ourselves behind bricks and mortar, and I've always felt very proud of that. I certainly have been challenged on it throughout the years, but I really think that our strategy is built around customers coming into our store, and everything that we do, all of the conversations, meetings, all of the forums that we have in the business are always geared up towards that in-store experience and that product. I think what we have gone through over the last decade is really understanding around the impact of social media. So really building up a very large social media following, and really being clear around which platforms we want to use for that. We do a lot of our marketing on social, and we have tens of millions of followers on social media that's been built up over a long time. I think the other bit of work that's been happening and quite recently has been around updating the website. So I think we're very clear around that digital experience in terms of a customer being able to stock check, being able to see our new product online, and having great quality photographs, and being able to check what's in their local store before they make the trip in. We've been able to launch that in the UK, and actually we're looking forward to being able to launch that updated website in the US quite soon. And some of the statistics have been great. I mean, over 80% more hits on the website since the updated version's gone out, and the customer feedback has been great, around understanding what is in stock in which size before I actually get into store. So I think our focus has been very much around how do we continue to build on the in-store experience using digital. And of course, I'm sure you're aware, but we have and are trialing a click and collect model in the UK, fairly small trial, but that's ongoing at the moment for 25 stores in the UK. And look, we're really excited to see what the results look like, but for the US, I'd always be very clear that needs to be incremental to our in-store sales, and it would need to be proved in terms of that model.
Curious from a process standpoint, how you guys, if you're willing to share, kind of think about the decision-making process, because on the one hand, there's all this talk about customer centricity, and being customer obsessed. It's a pretty common thing for retailers to talk about, and I would be surprised if your customers weren't telling you they didn't want e-commerce. But at the same time, we also know there have been not just you guys, but first of all, lots of retailers have experienced the problems with actually making money in e-commerce. So it's not as if it's just a panacea for all issues. But we've also know some retailers like TJ Maxx, that a lot of the off-price retailers that have been slow to embrace e-commerce, and I think that's largely because of the profitability. So was that, how much of this was economics? How much of this is about responding to the customer, or is it just that you guys are so committed to the brick and mortar experience?
Yeah, look, we of course do get feedback of customers asking for an online store, being able to get home delivery. So we do get those comments and those requests. But what we hear far more is about customers loving our value and wanting more of it. And I think there's certainly an understanding out there that for our model to work, online just doesn't fit into that model. And I think that's where, the trial of click and collect allows us to build on feedback from customers around sort of ease of shopping and access, I guess. And we can see the results of that without really breaking the model, I guess. And that's why we're quite excited to see that. But, our choice has always been bricks and mortar. And we've always been really clear around anything that we do needs to build on top of that in-store experience.
Last question for me, and I'll pass the mic back to Steve. Lessons learned. So for the fellow retailers listening, maybe they're outside of America, maybe they're within the U.S. What are the key success factors? What lessons have you learned that you'd share? Say, listen, if you're going to be successful, do these 3 things, and it will work out for you. Is there anything you'd want your fellow retailers to know or understand?
Yeah, I think really, really understand the core of your business and be obsessed by it. I think for us, we're very clear around product and around that value price. And I think we've set up our business to deliver that. I think, it's very easy, to get distracted and try and be everything to everyone, and particularly in today's world, I think, it's easy to get into that. But actually, I think to build a team and to remind yourself constantly about what has made you successful and to continue to build on top of that has really led to our success. So that would be my advice, to really understand your product and be obsessed about continuing to drive that.
One thing I was going to mention earlier was that as I was prepping for this interview, I went through an investor presentation that your parent company did, which featured a lot of really amazing interiors for some of your stores around the world, which kind of leads me, not only to talk about what's next for you and Primark here in the States, but also more broadly. Is there anything you can share about the growth plans and some of what you've got in store for other markets as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, we're now at 15 countries around the world. So obviously, look, I talk a lot about the US expansion, but there's still a huge amount of expansion happening across our European markets, as well as the 60 stores by 2026. Globally, we're moving towards 530 stores by 2026, which is exciting. We've got some great growth markets like France and Italy, where, we're really proud of the results and also the stores that we're opening there. So we continue on that as well. And for us here in the US, 60 stores by 2026 is where we made sort of our stand and our ambitions clear. And look, I'm excited to see the continued success. I'm excited to see, we had a great holiday. I'm looking forward to the new store openings in 2023. And we'll continue to learn the lessons. We'll continue to be obsessive about that and look to really refine the business model for the US market. And look, hopefully we'll continue that and be able to announce further growth in the future.
Well, I know Michael's looking forward to stores coming to Canada, so I don't know if you have any breaking news here. But
we have a store opening in Buffalo coming up, so we do know that around 40% of our customer base in our new store at Walden Galleria is going to be coming across the border, so we're excited.
Right. Listen, I think there's lots of opportunity. I think the Canadians would love to see you here, and it's exciting, a business that continues to expand. It's been a fascinating interview. So on behalf of Steve and myself, thanks so much for joining us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast. It was a great insight into a global business that is making it successful in around the world and in the United States. And it was a great peek into your thinking and strategy. So thanks again, Kevin, for joining us.
Thank you for the invite. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you liked our episode, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
And I'm Steve Dennis, strategic advisor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 2 books, Leaders Leap, Transforming Your Company at the Speed of Disruption, and Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant and advisor, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.